Welcome to the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Every week, you'll hear strategies for building your online service-based business your way. And now, here's your host, veteran freelancer, author, and TEDx speaker, Laura Briggs.
Welcome back to another episode of the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Today's topic is getting through a freelancing dry spell. And this is perfect because I don't care what anyone else says. One of the most valuable things to know is when you might encounter a freelancing dry spell, and how to prepare yourself for it is key for any freelancer, because I've seen this happen all too often where you don't have a plan at all to address what might happen if things get slow. And it has happened to all of us. In fact, it even happened to me recently. I let go 2 clients at the same time that another client had to put all of their marketing operations on pause. This was a significant loss in income. But even in these moments, you have the opportunity to think about how you're going to recover from this or handle it. And hopefully you've done some of the legwork in advance to be able to help protect yourself through this freelancing dry spell, because they do happen. Of course, one of the things that you want to focus on and be aware of as you grow your freelance business is building to the point of sustainability and replicating your results every single month. It can be very frustrating for freelancers who go from $1,000 to $5,000 to $2,500 to $10,000 back to $1,000 a month and everywhere in between. The more you can scale steadily to where you feel confident about the efforts that you put into your freelance business, the more comfortable you can be with deciding how much you're going to pay yourself, how much of your business revenue is going towards expenses, and etc. But freelancing dry spells do happen. In fact, that's a big part of the reason that I stayed in my day job for 13 months after launching my freelance writing side hustle. I had no idea if there were going to be dry spells. Now, I kind of had an eye-opening experience with this because I was coming in as a teacher. Now, where I taught, you could decide to have your paycheck distributed over the 12 months of the year. So you'd get paid, less per paycheck, but you'd get paychecks during the summer, or you could just get paid during the essentially 9 months of the school year. And a lot of teachers had to pick up extra opportunities to work outside of the classroom in the summer because they were hit financially, either because their general paycheck wasn't enough to cover them when they split it over the 12 months, or because they took the 9-month option and then didn't have enough set aside. So I kind of went in knowing, hey, that's a situation I'd like to avoid if at all possible. So let's talk about how to deal with things like slow summers and holidays. What other things can you do when you encounter this? I have been freelancing for 7 years, and I have consistently seen a trend every year where August is slow. It is a very hard time to market. So if you do not already have business booked going into August, it can be really hard to try to make that be one of your bigger months. I've also noticed that from around December 15th to about January 10th or 15th, it's a really slow period because a lot of people take vacation. They're out of the office. They are not thinking about content marketing or hiring freelancers. They may even be waiting for the calendar year to run out so that they know what budget they're working with the following year. A lot of people are just distracted during these periods. August is a huge time for back to school, people cramming in last minute vacations. They're just not really in the office. So if you're starting your marketing then, it can be really hard to even get people to respond to you, much less be ready to work with you. Now, there's also kind of a dead zone between Thanksgiving and sort of the beginning of December. You will encounter your people in the beginning of December who are looking to get projects done before the end of the year. You want to try and be in touch with them, before like December 18th, December 20th, because then you're in the holiday season and it's just a lot harder to get a hold of people, and you can often get lost in their inbox if you don't have this set up in advance. So what can you do to deal with knowing when these slow periods might be for you? And they might be a little bit different for you. First, you want to start by tracking your numbers and keep track of these details in a spreadsheet or something so you can go back and reflect and say, oh, okay, I know to expect that May is not my best month. So I'm going to use that going forward and try to book as much business in April as possible, or recognize that February is my busiest month, and I'm going to take some of the money I earn in February and carve it aside for an emergency. Now, I recently read a great article about why freelancers kind of more than anyone need to have an emergency fund. It is all too easy to have all your eggs in one basket with a couple of clients, or the worst case scenarios, you only have one client. If you have to fire that client, if something happens in your life where you're no longer able to work for them, if they fire you, if they end the contract, if the company goes out of business, you are really in a precarious financial place. This is why I never encourage anyone to stick with just one client. I don't care if it's 2 side clients that are a much smaller retainer. You cannot put everything into one client, one marketing platform, one anything. You need to vary it up so that you can protect yourself. I know when I first got started freelancing, I relied heavily on Upwork as a source of job leads until one of my colleagues pointed out, well, what will you do if the Upwork website is hacked tomorrow? And it was a wake-up call for me to say, I don't know what I would do. I don't really have another solid marketing stream. And I really started working on building that up. And it ultimately became LinkedIn and how I use LinkedIn. But I was terrified that I would not be able to, essentially pull this off. So that was a really good wake-up call for me to have, is what if Upwork shuts down? What if they change all of their policies and rules so that it's something I no longer want to work with? You've got to have options. So keys number 1, track your income. Number 2, never, ever, ever, ever rely on one client. I've seen it happen. In fact, it happened to someone that I know very recently. And I kind of got the inkling that that's where it was heading. And in hindsight, we'd had a lot of conversations about this one client. And I kind of encouraged this freelancer to get out of the relationship and to be marketing heavily for other things. And in hindsight, I wish I had been even more, not really aggressive, but more pushing this freelancer to have those protections in place, because exactly what I'm describing here happened. The client essentially imploded and this freelancer had to kind of scramble to make things up on the back end. So if you have 3 clients and you lose the big one, you still have a little bit of padding, right? And that padding from your other 2 clients, plus any money you've saved, having an emergency fund, Dave Ramsey talks about that all the time, that can give you a buffer until you get things sorted out. The other thing that is good to know is how long it takes you to convert a typical client in your different marketing channels. For me, Upwork clients sign quickly. LinkedIn clients take a long time. So I'm not going to ignore LinkedIn. I'm going to consistently be marketing there, because if I lose a big client, it could take me, 3 to 4 weeks to really build that relationship up and convert somebody. So I never let that go dormant, because the life cycle of pitching to that person, having a phone call, a proposal, going back and forth, can take a couple of weeks. Even if the client says that they need someone quickly, I have someone from LinkedIn like that right now. It's still taken 3.5 weeks to get everybody on the same page and kind of get the paperwork signed. So you're in a freelancing dry spell. Now I'm going to assume you've already been saving a portion of all the income that you make. You're setting it aside for expenses, for taxes, retirement, and also I recommend setting aside some in savings as your specific, not just your family's emergency fund, but your actual freelancer emergency fund. Ideally, that's going to be at least 1 month of expenses to carry you through in your business until you can rebuild. Even better if it can be more than 1 month of expenses. So because I've already, preached about that and been on the soapbox about why you need to have an emergency fund and why you should never, ever only work for one client or use one marketing method, I'm going to assume that if you haven't already set up that emergency fund, you're going to do so now, or maybe you've already set it up because you're a savvy freelancer and you already knew that. So now let's talk about, you're in this dead zone. It's really hard to drum up work, not impossible, but definitely harder. And I don't know about you, I don't like to just throw spaghetti at the wall during a time when I know it won't stick. So I'm not going to send out 100 pitches in the week before Christmas. Maybe half of those get read if I'm extremely lucky, but I know that the odds are kind of stacked against me. So why not send those inspired pitches in the beginning of the year, after the New Year's holiday, when people are thinking about their goals, when they're really in that resolution, let's get things right this year, I'm mapping my year out mentality. It's much easier to market during that time. Same thing within September, that back to school mindset. People have gotten their kids off to school. Now they're ready to think about what is the rest of the year going to look like. So I don't choose to put that pressure on myself of trying to make pitches convert when I know it's going to be much harder than that. to make it come to fruition. So I've stopped trying to do that and trying to like disprove this concept that it's hard to market during certain seasons. I try to know as much as I can when they're coming. So let's talk about 6 things you can do that don't involve marketing your business right away. It really involves you using this downtime to do some other things that can help you capitalize when business picks back up. So one thing that's great during this time is to reach out to your past clients to see how things are going. A really organic way to do this is to find an article or something interesting online that relates to their business or industry and send it to them and say, hey, I came across this. It made me think about you and your company. Hope things are going well. Notice I am not asking this past client for work. Maybe that conversation comes up, but I'm not specifically saying, hey, do you have anything I can work on? Now, if you are in something beyond a dry spell where you lost all your clients or you lost your one primary client, you do want to ask those past clients for work. But I like to look at this as an opportunity to re-engage and reopen that conversation. So another thing that you can do during this time is learn a new skill. This is the perfect time to think about picking up something that you haven't, that you wanted to do for a long time, but you haven't really been able to figure out. I started trying to learn how to market myself as a public speaker during a slow period. I decided during the summer when I knew things were slow to start pitching myself to do TEDx talks. I kind of had this, I used the holidays of 2017 to write my entire book proposal that eventually went to an agent. So I knew that there were other things where I could pick up a new skill. So I took that opportunity to learn something and really go next level with it. I really wanted to take on the ability to say, hey, I don't have to work 50 hours this week or even 30 hours this week. I don't have that much to do. So what is a new skill I'd like to pick up? I want to learn Google AdWords. I want to learn Facebook ads. I really want to learn grant writing or speech writing. It's a perfect time to find one of these online courses and pick that up. So the second thing you can do is turn to your tabled projects. What is the thing or group of things on your to-do list that always gets backburnered? You want to do it. Maybe it's building your website. Maybe your, LinkedIn profile is really a mess and you want to start being able to leverage that. That is a great thing to turn to during this downtime because there's really no excuses. And especially when you're in a slow season, if you haven't prepared for it, this is a good chance to go back to the drawing board and say, wow, I'm going to nail my marketing the next time around. So especially if it's a tabled project in marketing. So those are the 3 things that you can do out of 6. So a really easy one, number 4, is take some time off. If you don't have to work and you have saved your money and you just know that this is a slow period, take vacation. I used to always take vacation in August because I knew it wouldn't be that hard for me to step away from my business. I always close my office during the week between Christmas and New Year's because I know that I can turn in whatever would have been due early to my clients and it won't have that big of an impact. So take some time off. Bonus points if you see this coming down the road and you schedule that time off into your calendar rather than waiting until you sit down at your office on a Monday morning and go, I don't really have any work to do. So plan ahead. I always tried to make my vacations, my time off, my decompression weeks, or the weeks where I was picking up, something new, maybe in my personal development or personal goals, to coincide with what I already knew would probably be a slow season. So another thing you can do is try something outside of your comfort zone. Is there another service area you've been thinking about adding on to your business? Where can you step outside of your comfort zone and try something when the stakes are really low? If you take a new course on something, if you listen to a new podcast, pick up a new book, even try a personal hobby. Maybe you've wanted to do rock climbing, but you're like, I never had time to do that. Take a day to go do rock climbing. Sometimes getting outside of your house, getting outside of your own head can really help you come back rejuvenated for a busier period in your freelance business. So I love taking on something outside of your comfort zone and really pushing yourself. It's also so much easier to check into that mentality of try new things And, being willing to say, I'm not going to work all day. I'm not going to work 8 or 9 hours. I'm going to try something outside my comfort zone and pick up something new. So don't try to rail against the fact that it might be a slow season. How can you make it work for you to address some of these other things in your life, your business? Now, finally, slow seasons are the perfect time to refine your marketing. What's working? What isn't? Where have you slacked off with your marketing? This is a great time to revise your samples, to update your website, to map out a strategy for the next couple of months. So right now, as I'm recording this episode, I'm entering somewhat of a slower month in my freelance business. I am batch recording these podcast episodes, some YouTube videos, and some other material for my blog. I don't want to have to think about it into September and October, which are typically very busy months and months where I have some business travel coming up. So this slow season is the perfect time to take a step back and say, what is my highest converting platform? What is working in my marketing? What can I ditch because it isn't being effective? What services do I and don't I want to offer the rest of the year, right? I decided during a slow season in 2018 that I was not going to coach anyone the last 2.5 months of the year. I really wanted a break to kind of be rejuvenated, do some internal work and come back in the new year ready to work with some amazing clients. But that was the absolute right decision for me. And it happened during some CEO days and vision casting that I did during a slow period. I said, I really, that time, I didn't really want to be coaching, 3-4 people at a time all the way through the end of the year. And that helped me come back laser focused in the beginning of 2019. And I had 4 coaching clients, but I felt excited about working with 4 people at the same time because I'd kind of missed it during those times I took off. So this is also the time to dump what isn't working from your marketing. Have you been doing something and it isn't converting? If you still want to make it work, can you contact a coach or somebody who can help you with this? Or is it just time to say, hey, this avenue doesn't work for me? If you've tried for 6 months on, Twitter to try to land a freelance client and it hasn't happened, maybe it's time to just dump that from your schedule. And I love back to school time like August and also December, January. They're natural periods in which we tend to reflect on how things have gone. My birthday is also in January. So I love end of the year for recalibrating, figuring out what I want to do. Is there a service I'm selling that's doing well, but I don't necessarily want to offer it? All of these things can come up in your analysis of your marketing plan that you take on during a slow season. So a slow season doesn't have to be something where you're sitting around all day, panicked because you don't have income. Ideally, you've prepared for it, and you can actually use this as a creative opportunity to decide what you want to do next, either in your life or in your business. I kind of love having these things built into the year because for me, February through June is just a crazy time. It's always busy. And then September and October are also crazy busy. So by the time I hit the slow season in August and in December, I'm actually grateful for it because I've been pushing pretty hard those months before, and I'm ready to have a little bit of a break and a disconnect. A slow season doesn't have to be something that you view completely as a negative. It can be a chance to recalibrate, to take a true break for yourself. I had a freelance coaching client once who had not taken a vacation in 3 years. So we even discussed 6 and 7 months out. You are taking off the 2 weeks around Christmas and the holidays. You've expressed it as a desire. Let's put that in your calendar now. We know it's a slow season. The opportunity cost of what you would lose by being out of the office those 2 weeks it's so minimal what you'd lose, but the potential to really feel refreshed and excited at the end of the year, if it's your favorite holiday season, is amazing. So I never felt guilty either about taking 2 or 3 weeks of vacation in August. It hardly has ever impacted my business because things were just naturally slow and it worked out that way. So what are your favorite things to do during a freelancing slow season? I'd love to hear more about how you make these downtimes work for you. Remember, you can always send questions and comments to info@betterbizacademy.com. And remember to subscribe to the podcast. You always get updates about new episodes that drop every week. And I'd love it if you could leave me a review of the show inside iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast shows. It really helps other people who are freelancers find this show. I look